Hello everybody, David Shuster here. Like many of you, I am still working through the various stages of grief. The 2024 election went horribly wrong, and I'm convinced our nation is headed for some very difficult times. But in order to try and change the future, we Democrats need to be clear about the recent past and how we failed. So I've been looking at the election data and the surveys, and I'll give you my analysis in just a moment. First, though, Democratic strategist James Carville recently appeared on the Bulwark podcast and identified two major missteps that he believes cost Democrats the White House.
If the country wants something different, you try to give the country something different. And I think that this election really boiled down to two massive mistakes. First, nothing we can do about it, Biden gets out July 21st. Understand that there's this massive amount of talent in the Democratic Party. As I say, there's 350 hitters all over AAA ball. We just don't know them. And no, he gets out on the 21st. And I told Adam DeGurney, we didn't even get a chance to kick the tires. We just said, you're buying the car, and you have no choice. And, of course, we bought the car. And I think if this campaign is reducible to one moment, we're in a 65% wrong track country. The country wants something different. And she's asked, as so often the case, in a friendly audience on The View, how would you be different than Biden? That's the one question that you exist to answer. All right? That is it. That's the money question. That's the one you want. That's the one that everybody wants to know the answer to. And you freeze. You literally freeze.
That's right. Harris froze and said, I can't think of anything. And that exchange went into countless Republican campaign ads, and it hardened the perception of many voters that Kamala Harris was a candidate who would continue the Biden administration status quo. Supporters of the Biden administration and people who live in the fact-based world would point out that the Biden economy is great, with Wall Street stock records, long-term unemployment, unmatched job creation, including in manufacturing, and wage growth that has outpaced inflation. But in a world, fair or not, where 7 out of 10 Americans believe the nation is headed in the wrong track, tying yourself to President Biden was a mistake. Kamala Harris struggled from the start to distance herself from Joe Biden, and she failed to answer the most important question of the campaign, and that is, how are you different? The other mistake, as Carville noted, was the timing of Joe Biden's withdrawal from the race. President Biden gave Democrats no time to hold a legitimate primary. Instead, with his July withdrawal and quick endorsement of Kamala Harris as the nominee, Joe Biden stuck the Democrats. They were between a rock and a hard place. So here are my thoughts. I believe James Carville is right about Joe Biden putting Democrats in a bind and Kamala Harris making a big mistake in not being able to distance herself from Biden. To be fair, Harris was trying to show loyalty to Biden and his supporters, and the task of separating from him in a 100-day campaign may have been impossible, so I don't blame Kamala Harris. She tried to thread the needle, and despite running a strong campaign with a great convention and scoring a convincing win in the one presidential debate, Harris was clearly swimming upstream. President Biden's approval rating was 40%. In modern political history, no candidate tied to a White House sitting at 40% has ever won a presidential election. And Harris getting 48% of the popular vote shows that she actually did make some progress, but it wasn't enough. On top of the awful Biden timing and Harris's inability to get more separation from Biden, there are some other important factors as well. The biggest, according to the data, is right-wing misinformation and conservative media disinformation, or lies. According to multiple polls and surveys, when voters were given Harris policy positions on the economy, crime, and the border, and were not told whose policies they were, the voters overwhelmingly supported the policy proposals. The policy proposals associated with Donald Trump lost. Also, Election Day surveys found that voters who knew the truth about the economy and crime and immigration overwhelmingly voted for Harris. Voters who believed the lies that immigration and inflation and crime have never been worse voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. So it wasn't the economy or inflation or anything else. It was how people perceive those things that determine the outcome of this campaign. And keep in mind, there are many parts of the United States where huge swaths of people watch Fox News or Newsmax or other conservative media during the day, listen to right-wing talk radio in the car, and then see local news presented by a station owned by Sinclair, another right-wing company. The misinformation and lies about Democrats and about the issues of our time never ends. It goes from morning through night. And the result is you have 7 out of 10 Americans who see the nation under the Biden administration headed in the wrong direction. The only way, in hindsight, that I believe Democrats could have overcome those headwinds is by standing for something so big and so inspiring that it created a movement in and of itself. If Kamala Harris had campaigned on Medicare for all, and free college tuition, and taxing Wall Street trades to pay for working retraining programs, she would have broken away from the perception that she was just like Joe Biden. Yes, she might have been tagged as a Bernie Sanders progressive, but the irony is that the focus on helping the working class, not populism, might have broken through. It would have given a lot of working class voters something to rally around. Instead, Democrats tried to rally around voters around the message that, oh, the economy is much better than you've been told, and that Kamala Harris, with some smaller incremental steps like increasing tax breaks for new businesses, had some ideas on how to improve things. Well, yes, the Harris ideas would have improved things at the margins, but this was an election where Democrats needed to go big and prove to working class voters that big changes were coming if Harris won. Instead, Kamala Harris came to represent the status quo. Democrats got burned by misinformation and lies that were spread nonstop by conservative media, and as a result, Donald Trump won. Now, it's true that Medicare for all and other big-ticket working-class items would have sparked lies from the right wing about Harris possibly crashing the economy or ruining our healthcare system, but a debate about what might happen in the future would have been better for Democrats than a debate about what has already happened, given the peculiarities of this race and all the misinformation. And 3 months was clearly not enough time to get a majority of the American electorate beyond 3.5 years of right-wing misinformation. 3 months to try to overcompensate for 3.5 years of lies. It didn't work. Finally, there's one other factor that was in play: sexism and racism. A majority of Latino men and white men voted for Donald Trump. Several voters acknowledged that Kamala Harris, being a black woman, was an issue for them. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't acknowledge that racism and bigotry still exist in America. And even if it only cost Kamala Harris a point or two, well, in the crucial battleground states, that was the Trump margin of victory. So what now? Well, moving forward, Donald Trump's deportation plans and tariffs will crash the economy. And maybe that kind of economic crisis is all that Democrats will need to regain political power. But I still believe Democrats should stand for something ambitious and inspiring. We're the only industrialized nation in the world that does not guarantee healthcare as a right. We pay more for prescription drugs than every other country on the planet. There is room for America to make big progress in helping working class families and making life fairer and easier and more stable and safe. So let's start there. Stand for economic populism and for growing the middle class and for closing the gap between the wealthy and the poor. Maintaining the status quo as Democrats is not enough. And oh, by the way, let's have a vigorous primary debate in 2028 about all of this before the next presidential election. Deal? I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.